Afternoon, Bill. Take two, I think.
No, this is our third today.
Our third today, yeah.
That's
when
right.
you're having fun, it flies away, doesn't it?
Yeah, and another day in paradise down here in Geelong.
It is, and we've had a couple of good chats this morning and this afternoon.
Yeah, and the aftermath, and people will hear the result of our interview with Nat Anson at a later date. And it's great to see such a person so positive about the future of the developments around Geelong.
Yeah, very passionate, wasn't he?
Oh, he sure
very
was.
passionate. If you could bottle it, you could sell it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so who are we chatting to now, Bill?
Well, today I've got a good friend of mine, and we interviewed his son. Some of the listeners might remember Cody Thompson.
From WrkPod.
From WrkPod in the Philippines. And today we've got James Thompson. So welcome, James.
Thank you, Bill.
Good.
Thank you, Mark.
So James has he's got a long history. No, I'm calling him old now. He's got a varied history in his life, and he's got an MBA from Melbourne University, but he's had numerous positions in local government and everywhere, and he's run two of the largest poultry businesses in Australia. And I'd just like to hear his journey, and I guess that's where we'll start. And you know the first question.
I know the first question. So, James, where was primary school?
Well, before we start talking about primary school, I'm a little bit sad today.
Oh,
because,
okay.
Collingwood's lost their third game in a row.
Hey, Geelong supporters, we're really happy.
But they can't take away the Premiership Cup that we won last year. So it's going to be a long year by the looks.
Oh, look, as we're used to trudging in and out of GM or Cardinia Park. Oh, anyway.
Yeah.
So where was primary school, James?
Primary school for me was a little place called Crong Vale, which is about 70 k's northwest of Bendigo. If you travel up the Calder Highway from Bendigo all the way up to Mildura, so 70 k's from Bendigo northwest. So our folk, the Thompsons, were some of the first European settlers into that area back in the 1860s. So that was where I was born, where I was raised, and then I attended the local high school at Wedderburn, which is about eight mile away from Crong Vale. And from
can I just ask a quick question? You weren't on a dairy farm, were you?
No, it was
because we've got so many dairy farmers.
Lots of dairy farmer stories.
No, very much a dry land mixed farming up there. We had you name it. We had it. We had chooks, we had ducks, we had cattle, we had sheep. In fact, there were also rabbits on the farm. I think the rabbits outnumbered everything else on the farm.
Yeah, could be right.
But look, 700 acres back in those days, and you can't eke out a living now unless you've got something like 4,000 hectares in dryland farming.
Well, that's right. The farming has certainly consolidated, and it's going to consolidate more as we go. So primary school to where? Secondary school?
So high school at Wedderburn High, and look, there were only 16 of us kids doing HSC. It was known back then.
Yep.
And the principal, I can recall, he actually convinced my mother that I should do full sciences the last 2 years of my education at Wedderburn High School. And I now look back and understand the only reason he did that, because I was quite good on the humanities side, on the commerce side, and I was okay on the science side. But he convinced Mum that I should do sciences, and the only reason he did that because there was only two of us that did it, so he kept the science teacher at the high school. Because I remember going down to finishing HSC and just passed, and thought, well, what am I going to do with myself? So, I went down to careers education by the RAAF to be a technician in. And Bill knows me well enough, and I certainly didn't have that aptitude. By the time I got through all the courses for the day and got to the psychologist at the end of the day, he looked at me across the desk and he said, "What in the hell are you doing here?" So, sorry.
No, it's good. So when you left high school, that was what you were thinking, to go get into the RAF as a technician.
Yeah.
Where did you go then? What?
Well, a few of us were in half a dozen in a car. We were actually picking tomatoes at Bridgewater, 20 mile down the road on the Loddon River after we'd finished our HSC. And I remember Mum collecting me this day, and there was a job at the local Shire office as a paymaster cost clerk. So, cut a long story short, that's where I started my first job, after getting paid for the tomato picking.
Yep.
But my first professional job, if you like, as a paymaster cost clerk at the Shire of Corong. And, of course, getting in there and the senior peers, professionals in the business suggested that, look, if you can go a long way in local government, so you perhaps need to study again. So I took up the books. I remember I failed my first subject. It was a law unit because I thought, well, I've done HSC and I didn't put the effort in, and I failed. And I thought, well, okay, if you really want to do well at this, you've got to put the effort in, like anything in life. So I studied externally through the RMIT, Diploma of Business, majoring in local government, over a period of 5-6 years. They were hard yards. And I was one of the youngest in the state to actually receive my qualifications. My first senior executive role was assistant town clerk down at the city of Castlemaine.
Oh, nice little town.
23 I was, and within 3 months of me starting, I knew the town clerk well, but he decided to leave and moved to Port Fairy as a town clerk down at Port Fairy. So here I was as a 23-year-old. Thrown into acting town clerk of the city of Castlemaine and all that goes with that. And it's a bit like the old saying, you either sink or you swim. Well, I was lucky to swim, and I look back and it was too much responsibility at such a young age, but I took it on board. And a couple of years after that, I was made appointed CEO of the Shire of small little rural shire north of Maryborough, Shire of Bet at the age of 25. So local government, I was in local government through to the years of restructure which occurred.
Amalgamation
in 93. And, I was very fortunate to be involved with a council that, albeit small, was very, very progressive in its thinking. And we actually established whereby the councils didn't necessarily amalgamate. We amalgamated all the administration and engineering functions of the two councils. The two councils still kept their council laws. There's two separate council bodies. But we amalgamated everything and saved something like 10% of our rate revenue, lowered our level of borrowings, got greater efficiency with the operation of all the plant and equipment. Of course, Kennett was the Premier at the time, and Roger Hallam was the local government minister, and they lauded what the shires were doing that did such a thing. But I was seen as a bit of a pariah in the industry because it was a bit like opening the wedge of the door. You've got these 210 councils and 210 CEOs and the like. Well, all of a sudden that quickly came back to 70 odd.
Yep.
So we sort of played into the hands of what the government were endeavouring to do. But look, it worked very well. So after that period in time, restructure, because I'd been out consulting when we set up those two councils. I put up my hand and said, look, I'll on contract run the finances for both councils, and the other chap who was the CEO was CEO of both. My council brought me back just before restructure because they weren't happy with where their partner council was wanting to go. So I came back for 12 months, and when restructure, the orders of governor and council orders come through, I then decided, well, look, it's time for me to perhaps go back and re-educate myself, and I put myself through the Melbourne Business School at the University of Melbourne, and that opened my eyes to a much broader world than...
Well, coming back, tipping point, sliding doors, tipping point was the amalgamation of the councils that led you into going to Melbourne to do that program. Well, just go back a bit, was picking tomatoes your first ever job?
Well, when you're out of nappies on a farm, Bill, as you'd probably well know, and Mark, you're working.
That's right.
Mum and Dad get you working.
Yeah,
I think we're collecting eggs and catching lambs and all sorts of things.
So that give you your obvious love for agricultural?
Well, look, if you'd have told me back then that I would have ended up doing what I did with chooks and ducks and salads and vegetables, I wouldn't have believed you.
All right, well, we'll come to that. So out of council, off to Melbourne Business School, what that lead to then?
What led to was I did because I had my own management consultancy business that was primarily before restructure doing stuff for a number of local authorities. But I came out and did a project for one of the Ballarat state government health organisations. That was my first project. Then I was involved with a large accountancy firm in Melbourne looking at an investment proposal for a large heritage tourism operation. And my first going back into employment was with Vision Australia, which was then known as Association for the Blind, as regional manager of the Loddon Mallee region from Bendigo right up to Mildura. Yep. And of course that was at a time when Vision Australia had bricks and mortar in the aged care homes for the vision impaired. It's subsequently got out of bricks and mortar and just into the rehab services. Yep. So I was there just a couple of years because when they got out of, they decided to do a restructure. I think they had McKinsey or one of the big management consultancy firms come in. They got out of bricks and mortar and put more money into rehab services, and they restructured the regions and centralised things more out of Melbourne. So at that time then I was fortunate to be appointed as CEO of the Bendigo Trust. And the Bendigo Trust oversees the heritage attractions in Bendigo, the Central Deborah Gold Mine and the famous Bendigo talking tram. So I spent 5 years there.
Very good. And the talking tram's still going.
And the talking tram's still going, yes.
Yeah, no.
Now, Bendigo, and I know you've gone back to live in Bendigo. How is Bendigo going at the moment?
Fantastic. Look, it's been 7 years since I've lived in the city. It's a city similar size to Ballarat, 130,000 plus people now. But look, people in the local government industry, when I was involved in that industry, you could clearly see that the future of decentralisation, that cities like Ballarat, Bendigo, like even Geelong's much bigger than both Ballarat and Bendigo, but the capacity for those cities to have 500,000 plus. Yeah. That's the future. And I go up there now, and the developments that are going on up there is to be seen to be believed, and the same thing's actually happening in Ballarat.
So industry-wise, because yesterday we heard that there's a drop in unemployment, which is a bit worrying because the pundits are saying that will also affect inflation again. So what's the industrial situation like in regional in Bendigo?
Well, of course, I was involved myself as marketing manager, general manager, and then CEO of Hazeldene's, the large chicken meat business.
So how did you get in that before?
Well, there's a few slots after the Bendigo Trust to get to Hazeldene's.
Okay.
But look, the manufacturing base up there it seems to be growing. Like the poultry industry is a huge industry, and that business, Hazeldene's, employs something like 850 people locally, and then you've got Parmalat, or it's called something else now, which is another large industrial organisation up there. But I think the problem is, and it continues to be, is because of the low unemployment rate, is actually getting people for these businesses, and that seems to be going to continue after we saw the drop in the unemployment rate, which is quite extraordinary.
I think there's been a few shocks about that.
So let's. How did you get into the agricultural side of life then? Where was your first role in that, bar the farm and the?
Yeah, well, so after the Bendigo Trust, 5 years as the CEO there, my partner and I moved over to Ballarat for a couple of years and worked with the opposition, if you like, Ballarat, Bendigo. They see themselves competing a bit. But a lovely gold heritage city and a great place to live, albeit a little bit cooler than Bendigo. But I actually lectured in marketing up so I continued my management consultancy business, lectured in marketing up at which was then called the University of Ballarat. It's now the Federation University, but had a great time there. And I was doing other consulting work for a large retail and commercial property developer. And I had 2 weeks as CEO of Melbourne River Cruises, but that only lasted 2 weeks. But I'll go no longer there.
Okay, story for another day.
A story for another day. But after my partner and I came back to Bendigo after a couple of years, and I was working as branch manager of Drake International. And so in recruitment, labour hire, perm recruitment for industries and businesses in the Bendigo district. And that's what brought me into contact with Hazeldene's. And we had Drake International there. We had 150 labour hire staff actually working out at Hazeldene's, and there was difficulties there with the union as such, for us to actually have that number of staff on site. So I was sitting across the table negotiating contracts with the managing director of Hazeldene's, John Hazeldine. So he obviously saw my capacities and capabilities, and I remember getting a phone call from one of his staff one day and said, look, would you like to come in and meet John Hazeldine one Saturday morning? And so I went in and met John, and he said, look, I'd like to see you come on board in the business. I don't know what you're going to do. So I had to basically write my own position description for my first role. But I was there for, great business, great family, and there for 5 years as marketing manager, and then another 5 years as general manager, and then just under a couple of years as CEO before I made the decision to move on to other greener pastures. But
like many, James, those larger family businesses have all been swallowed up by the big boys, aren't they?
Yes.
And that's what's happening now, right across the board.
Yeah.
If I just want to try and link your son's business model for a bit, because it's really an outsourced services provider. I think is that a accurate or not description of what his business is? Yeah,
my son Cody, second oldest son Cody, he started out in building a web development business over in the Philippines 9 years ago, and his own staff, he recruited his own staff, literally interviewing people over in the Philippines online whilst he's back living in Queensland, and just his experiences with recruiting these young people who were coming straight out of universities over there at a place called Dumaguete on Negros Oriental. He built that business from 0 up to 100 staff in his web development business. And during the pandemic, he actually built a 3-storey building, and he had 60 desks to fill. And he had a lot of mates in Australia saying, look, you know how to employ these young people, and can you get some for us? Within the space of 3 months, he actually filled up the 60 desk space. And from that, he decided, well, look, there's an opportunity here for me to grow a business and actually service businesses within Australia and New Zealand, as was the original focus, but now they're also serving businesses in the UK and the US. But Cody's established WrkPod only a couple of years ago. A business coach that he's had for many years has actually come on board as a co-founder of WrkPod too, so they both work equally in the business. Cody is CEO, and his co-founder Dale Bowman as a director of the business. But it's doing extraordinarily well, and what these young people are actually doing, they're actually employed as independent directors directly with these Australian and New Zealand businesses. So the model of the business is different to what's known over there as the BPOs, business processing outsourcing companies, which typically, like labour hire, lease or rent staff out to businesses. These are actually staff that WrkPod, because of their knowledge and capacities in recruiting staff, then fit those staff to client customers from Australia and New Zealand that are requiring low cost, no question about it. They're 70% plus lower cost than Australia and New Zealand, but they're very, very high value staff. They're coming out of these fantastic universities, highly educated, and great capacity, great work ethic, and lovely people. But what they're doing is the whole essence about what Cody and Dale, his business partner, are about. Government research over in the Philippines, every person you employ in the Philippines, it's a developing country, we've got to recognise that, but every person you employ is supporting 20 other members of their extended family, their immediate family, and then their grandparents and the like. Very strong family associations over there. So the aspirations of Cody and Dale as owners of the business they're currently at 500 staff. They'll get to 10,000 staff in December 28. So 10,000 by 20 family members that they're actually going to be supporting over in that business.
And if you want to know more about Cody's story, Bill and I interviewed Cody.
That's right.
And it's
on
a
our
fascinating journey from starting off doing one website for the Ballarat Mall, I think it was, to where he is today. Is unbelievable. Coming back to you a little bit, James, is you finished up with Hazeldene's. Then what other places have you worked at?
So I went from Hazeldene's, a bit like a plate of food. I had the chicken meat for 12 years, and then I went salads and vegetables. A great little family business called Coolabah Herbs down in the Mornington Peninsula, based at Pearcedale. And as I said, a great little business, very innovative business. They were the leaders in organic baby spinach and other organic salads and vegetables. And if you go into your local Woolworths supermarket and see the organic baby spinach in Woolworths brand, that's Coolabah Herbs. And you'll see other Coolabah Herbs branding of products, particularly in the IGA. But a great business, and I was the general manager there for a couple of years. And they have farming operations not only around the Mornington Peninsula but also in Warrigal, up in central Victoria around Dalesford, and also up so they can farm across the whole season cycle up in Weeman, up on the Murray. But after 2 years there, I moved on and went for a bird of another feather, a duck instead of a chicken. Duck meat. So chicken meat, salads, veggies, duck meat. I'm just working my way around the plate. So a company called Duck, another great family business that has got great heritage, and it's very similar in the supply chain logistics and things as Hazeldene's. It's a different animal. The duck farmers would quite often tell me when I'd go into their sheds, look, a duck's not a chicken, son. You might have all these ideas about how you grow.
So you've obviously worked for some big family businesses.
Yes.
As opposed to what people think is a family business, which is small. These are big family businesses. Have you always, you enjoy that? You enjoy because it's always interesting that the person who you're working for owns the business hands on. Like they own it.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of challenges, and not denying that. And I think what prepared me for being involved with family business was my local government background. And dealing with all the machinations that go on with councillors and community and the like. So that stood me in good stead with being able to. You've got to work with a degree of grace and diplomacy dealing with families. It's not my business. It's their business, and you can come up with ideas and concepts, and it's being able to try and work with them as best as you can. We're all there to be green and growing. We never want to be red, ripe and rotting.
Yep.
And these businesses have actually started from a very small base. So Hazeldene's started with mum and dad and the kids and a few chooks, and grew to, processing, 700,000 chickens a week.
It's a lot of chickens.
Payroll, turnover, company that was turning over when they sold it a couple of years ago at $350 million a year.
Not a little family business, is it?
That's right. 850 staff that you're responsible for. Coolabah Herbs, staffing numbers of 150, and Duck, 250.
Yep.
So, they're sizable businesses.
Do you think trust plays a big part in it, James? Do you think you have to have the trust of the family when you're working there? Or the respect of the family?
Without question. And you've got to prove your spurs. And I think the fact that I've worked over those cycle of 18 years with 3 families, they obviously all talk to the other families.
Yep.
At certain points, it can become very, very frustrating if you've got energy and you want change to happen, and change is a little bit slow sometimes, but they've grown to the size and scale they have because they've been adaptive, they've been innovative along the way. So, but to Bill's point earlier, that a lot of these families, and look, it's like where I come from in the farming game, 700 acres, and little farms are slowly being gobbled up. We're seeing that in industry generally.
Yep.
Just the consolidation.
James, just going back to Well, first of all, WrkPod. My example is that if Mark and I own a business, for instance, and we employ an admin staff with sales staff and work desks and all the rest of it of, say, 50 people, we can, in simplistic terms, we can pick that up and actually plonk it into your son's business. And what he does, he actually sets up our business inside his own business, and they belong to us.
Yeah,
that staff group. Yeah. That's how it works.
Exactly. That's how it works. And WrkPod is an umbrella body providing a safe and secure work site with first-class IT infrastructure, optic fibre technology over there. It's seen to be believed, the Philippines, with their speed capacities and the like. But yes, simply, and what the pandemic's actually shown businesses in Australia and other areas of the world and the Western world is that, okay, we've set up systems and processes due to the pandemic for staff to work from home, and it's costing us X. It can be done for Y at 70% plus less over in the Philippines or elsewhere. So they're implanting themselves. So it's really opened businesses' eyes to the capabilities at a time when it's very hard to get staff anyway.
Yeah.
You know, particularly in Australia, is for all businesses to look as part of their staffing portfolio to have an international team. Not only a small component perhaps of your overall staffing. And then what it's doing is actually enabling these businesses, and this is typically what we're seeing, it's enabling the Australian business to grow further. And they're employing Australians doing other higher level of skills in the business.
Yep.
So it's not downplaying the level of skills in the Philippines, but because I've seen it, it's what's amazed me. You've got people from CAD design drawers to paralegals to people as medical clinicians, pharmacists and the like, working for a range of different businesses. Only recently we had a very large container wharf logistics warehousing business come together with WrkPod to partner with us to actually engage staff to help in a number of their back-end functions because they got recommended by another similar business in Australia. So look, in time what we're going to see is an evolution actually occur where an increasing number of Australian businesses will have a small subset of staff as an international team.
So how do you go working for your son? Who's boss?
Son's boss. He's got a creative mindset for which has really helped in what he's done. But basically, I've played the role of sort of wise counsel, if you like, and coming in and you can appreciate a business that's gone from 0 to 500 in 2 years. There's a lot of things, and I'm fond of using analogies. I said to my son the first 2 weeks I was over there, just looking and listening, being an elephant. And I said, you've got a situation here where you're starting, the willow tree starting to get bigger and bigger. It needs some pruning.
Yep.
You know, some role clarity and foundational policy work to ensure that you're managing your risks in the business. So, yeah, as I said, I was very, very careful not to usurp what he's done and what his director's done and what the general manager's doing, but just try and be a wise counsel.
A sounding board?
A sounding board. And look, they've all been appreciative of that. Look, it's like anyone in business, Dad, someone from the outside as a facilitator come in. You know, too often businesses, we can get that involved in the day-to-day hurly-burly. But to have someone come in and look a helicopter view and look over the business and look in and around the business, that wise counsel is so important.
James, you're travelling back and forwards, obviously, to Cody's business. Now, I just want to ask about your observations in the differences of what you observe of the Filipinos and how they think, how they work and how they socialise versus, you know, you've worked in businesses here where there's been large numbers of staff. Have you noticed an appreciable difference, I guess, I know country culture comes into this, but just in that work environment, what are the main differences?
The Filipino people have got a very high work ethic, without question. What is certainly noticeable over there is and it comes through, and I don't pretend to be an expert in their history, but in the 1500s when the Spanish came in and missionaries, but there's a very, very strong Christian undercurrent, particularly Roman Catholicism, and there's that gentleness that you can actually feel through the, Dumaguete's known as the Negros Oriental as the land of the gentle people, and you can certainly feel that, like even out in the traffic, it's beep beep on the horn. Australia, the acts of road rage and everything else. But there's an underlying gentleness and this very strong family orientation in the business. And look, they are lovely, genuine people. The thing that is frustrating is that I come from a world, particularly in agribusiness, 24/7 with dealing with perishable products, is being immediate and being action orientated. You've got to, because time is money. If you let things lie, the perishable products can die, and you've wasted tens of thousands of dollars. But that can be a little bit. I say to my son, you've got to sit back sometimes and just bite your tongue, because things don't happen with that level of immediacy, and you can be terribly frustrated over there about the bureaucracy of everything. They have form filling going. You go to the supermarket, you'll get into the supermarket, and you might not be seen for 2 days for the bureaucracy to get out of the supermarket. So there's a great bureaucracy that goes on too. But at the end of the day, very productive, great loving Christian people to a general rule. But there's some things that do frustrate you in the culture. But
your son comes from a background though of Salvation Army and volunteering and all that sort of thing. So I guess it's no strange for him to be in the Philippines that it is actually an environment similar.
Well, it's interesting because he put a post out on Facebook. Well, that's another thing. They love Facebook. Yep. If you communicate in the Philippines, it's all got to be on Facebook. That's it, 100% Facebook. But Cody put something out the other day, and it popped up. He's got a new career at WrkPod. Well, it caused a laugh amongst all his staff, because he did that not to be funny, but just to say that he's the co-owner and all this sort of thing. And we're having a bit of a joke about that. But there was a few staff actually made reference to Cody's his presence with the Lord himself, because he's a youth pastor himself, and that is because he's fitted in so well to their culture and their ethos, because that's the world he comes from.
Yeah, that's cool. Interesting.
It's very cool, isn't it? It is very cool.
Yeah.
So James, you have an amazing story, and what I think there's obviously, and I can see it when chatting to you, that you obviously, when you meet people, when you go for a job, regardless of whether you've got the skill set for that job, you've got a broad skill set that people want to bring you on because they know you can add value to their business. And that seems to be how you've you've varied from local government to running Loverduck to now assisting your son at WrkPod. That's a gamut of roles. So that's really cool. So thank you. Thank you for Mark. Your time. I've really enjoyed today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's good. It's when we interviewed Cody, we did put in the book that we better interview James.
Yep.
And we finally got around to it.
So it's brilliant. So thank you, James.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.